So I'm going to let you peek behind the curtain to my process as I'm putting things together. So I'm scouring the news, and as I do, I grab the article and the link and I categorize it. And every weekend I have, for the last, I don't know how long now, done a what's going on, the latest weekly recap. And this is my weekly recap, but I'm showing you the documents that I'm talking about. So here are the links, and here are like the summary of it. So three people, this goes back to Friday the 2nd of June. And so we're a little over a week. Three people were killed as they were unable to get into locked bomb shelters, and that caused a big investigation in Ukraine, and they have corrected that. Russia thwarts Belgorod attacks, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, which that they were lying. There were still fighting going on in Belgorod. Zelensky was at a Moldovan European summit. Scott Ritter was on RT with an article called Waging Peace, and I spent time debunking what he was talking about in that article, or explaining how Ritter sees the world. Ukraine says it downed all drones and missiles that were shot at Kyiv that day. This was really interesting. The Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan says that Armenia is not Russia's ally in the war in Ukraine. Now that's really interesting. For a small state that's generally dependent on Russia to be taking that kind of stance is unthinkable. Ukraine has to battle expectations over the counteroffensive, and that's true because the Russians were kind of pumping up those expectations so that whatever happened, they could say, well, I mean, we knew it was going to be that, or see, it wasn't that significant. Lukashenko said the only mistake was not finishing off Ukraine in 2014. Wow, like that's quite a statement for him to say the only mistake we made was to not finish off. Here's the actual article in Politico. Lukashenko, the only mistake we made was not finishing off Russia in 2014. So that's where Lukashenko stands, and his country was the ground for the invasion. Now, where's Belarus, and this makes a lot of sense. Here's Belarus on the map. Here's Ukraine below that, right? Belarus is surrounded by Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland on this side. And if Ukraine joins the West, they're surrounded on three sides, and they don't want that. Right now, they have Russia on one side, Ukraine kind of neutral, and the West over here. But if Ukraine becomes part of the West, they're not going to be very happy about that. So that's why he's taking that position. Okay, and then here are all the links, and you can look at the links if you want. That's fine. Just pause the show. Okay, so here is Saturday, June 3rd. Over 4,800 bomb shelters were checked. 252 were locked, and they have fixed that problem because I think two people died and 11 were injured, not being able to get into a shelter, and so it became a big thing. Okay, so Zelensky says he's ready to launch a counteroffensive, and we're starting to see that develop. Ukraine is developing drones in country. There was this fascinating article about their drone creation program. Prigozhin, factions in the Kremlin are destroying the country, and he says he will withdraw Wagner from Ukraine if the war is, quote, led by clowns who turn people into meat. Of course, he turns people into meat, but he doesn't want other people turning people into meat, and so that was pretty interesting. And even the rhetoric against the military is interesting, but again, my theory is, and this is just a theory, that he's Putin's mouthpiece to slap at the military. Zelensky is reaching out to Latin American leaders. That's important because the global south has been largely neglected, and Russia has been making overtures to them, trying to feed into them their narrative. Russia claims to have enough Iranian suicide drones to deplete Ukrainian air defenses. And so what's fascinating about that is that drones are really economical ways of doing that, of depleting air defense artillery that's very expensive, and the Russians have figured that out, and so that's one of the few things where they get high marks. And it's terrible, it's awful, it's a disaster, but they are very smart from just a sheer military point of view in doing that. People leaving Russia in large numbers. That was another article that I found really interesting here. Why are people leaving Russia, and where are they going? Look at the number, just the chart of people leaving Russia. When did the war break? Broke in February of 2022. And look how many people are leaving Russia. And over time, even more. Like this, I think, was the somewhere around, well, I'm not even going to talk about where the events were, but I mean, it's pretty significant, and it keeps going up. And that brain drain can't be good for Russia. Okay, so let's keep going here. People are leaving Russia in large numbers. Next, last Sunday, Russian governor urges residents in Belgorod village to evacuate because they were under attack by the Russian Legion, which was absolutely fascinating that this small number could have this much damage, and the Russians wouldn't even really do much to retaliate, or other than on paper say that they were doing something. Kremlin consumed with spying and treason. It was a story of the hypersonic scientists who were charged with treason. Putin is diplomatic headache for South Africa, right? So the BRICS summit is going to be there, and the South Africans are like, look, don't come, we're going to have to arrest you. The Hill, Ramaswamy, he's running for president as a Republican, said that Russia is not a top foreign policy priority for us. That's really disappointing because he's a solid candidate. He's a very outside chance, right? He's not really a likely candidate, but his positions from a conservative point of view are pretty solid in other regards, and I hate to lose him, and I can't vote for somebody like that. The Hill, Haley, who's also running for president, former governor of South Carolina and ambassador to the United Nations, warns that Ukraine loss could lead to a world war. Yeah, that's exactly right. She's gotten it. This is why you're supporting Ukraine. If you're a conservative, you're looking at this going, that's wrong. This shouldn't happen. And this can get worse if we don't do something about it. Russia claims to have captured the Russian Legion. Well, they're still there days later, so that didn't happen. The Russian Legion takes prisoners and offers to trade them. So not only were the Russian Legion still there, but they were actually, oops, sorry about that. They were actually taking prisoners while they were there. Okay, Monday, June 5th, significant escalation in fighting in the Donetsk. Wagner captures a Russian lieutenant colonel and tortures him for firing on Wagner. And like they beat the guy up, and like he's a Russian colonel, and they okay. So Russia claims that thwarting of the counterattack. Ukraine admits some offensive actions were underway, finally, but they're very quiet about that. And I'm going to show you this, the Ukrainian silence campaign. So there was an effort to be, like, I'm going to show you this. So there was even a video from the Ukrainian government showing soldiers going, shh. And this is one of the reasons that I'm not talking really about the counteroffensive, and I'm not showing anything battle map related or anything like that. I think we ought to just leave it alone. Now, at the same time, Russian propaganda is going to go and try to make hay of that because they're the only voice there. But that's okay. If they're the only voice there for a short period of time, we'll see what happens on the other side. Ukraine cultivated sabotage agents inside Russia and gave them drones. That's awesome. And so that tends to justify the theories of a partisan attack within Russia for the drones over Moscow or whatever. Fake Putin mobilization announcement was aired. This was absolutely awesome. So there was an announcement that went out that said, and sounded like Putin's voice on the radio, talking about how we had to mobilize because of these incursions into Belgorod. It was all faked. It was a deep fake. Okay, so Tuesday, the Nova Kahova bridge, or not bridge, the dam was blown. Sorry about that. Sometimes I have my own typos, but I know what I'm talking about. The Nova Kahova dam is blown. Ukraine blames Russia. Russia blames Ukraine. It's an ecological disaster. Ukraine calls Russia a terrorist state in the opening statements of the International Court in The Hague. It's not about the dam. It was about something else, but they still, I mean, that was quite some timing. In RT, they say that Ukraine did it as revenge for a failed offensive. Like, like that's the best that they could do with their propaganda. It reminds me of like the kid writing a note to a teacher saying, Johnny is sick to his stomach and can't come to school today. Honesty is, like, parents don't write like that, but a little kid might write like that. That's like the way that they write their propaganda. It's really it's almost cartoonish in some stages. Russian law gave permission not to investigate the dam days before it blew. Wow. So, like, they kind of knew that something was up or could be up. Russian estimates of Ukrainian casualties were 10 to 1. Actually, it was more like 13 to 1. This was just a rough ballpark. So this is less than 300, and this is of Russian dead and wounded, and this is 37,000. So it's actually 13 to 1. I did the math. That was just a rough cut to 10 to 1. Ukraine makes modest gains on the Eastern Front. Zelensky lauds their advance. The U.S. sees the offensive is going better than expected, which is good news. Lavrov, he's always interesting. He's the foreign minister of Russia. Lavrov says that Nordic nations are under NATO's thumb for a decade. Shame on them. They should be under our thumb, not under NATO's thumb. Really? I mean, like, the Nordic nations are very happy to have NATO's umbrella. They're running to NATO's umbrella, so not much to see there. There's an article talking about Ukraine's D-Day. Prigozhin was scoffing at the idea that the Russian army inflicted heavy losses on Ukraine. He even called it science fiction. Like... That's pretty significant. And then there was an article, and you'll see a lot of press on this on the within Russian state media, and then the popularizers of it. I took one of them to task the other day. U.S. had intelligence about a potential Ukrainian Nord Stream attack. That's true. They did find out that this could happen and that the Ukrainians were interested in it, but they didn't have details and they didn't have a verifiable source, but it could have happened. We don't know what happened yet. This was intelligence that it could happen, and there are all the articles that I was talking about. Okay, Wednesday, Tucker calls Zelensky rat-like. That was in his Tuesday night his first episode, and I reviewed his first episode, so if you want to check that out and see just how Tucker goes off the rails. He's going to become more and more like Alex Jones if this continues. That's my estimation. More about the dam break. The BBC said that 29 communities so far had been flooded after the breach. The fields could become deserts. Axios talked about how Tucker broke his contract with Fox News, and there could be some legal action after that. Putin labels the dam attack as a barbaric act. He's right about that. It was a barbaric act, and it shouldn't have happened. Erdogan offered to mediate with the commission, and Zelensky immediately agreed, but we've heard nothing from Russia yet. We're still trying to hear from Russia about, remember where they bombed the POWs and said it was a American missile attack that destroyed the POW prison? And like, well, we want to hear an international investigation, the Russians said, and they never let them in. So it's that same kind of thing again. Poll, Europeans who see Russia as an adversary have now doubled. Okay, so that's Wednesday. Thursday, more updates on the dam. The population is without drinking water below the dam where the damage is. The Russians are blocking evacuation efforts. They're even shooting at rescuers. I mean, that's wow. Russians are shelling Kherson after Zelensky's visit. Zelensky came to the border and observed the damage, and good on him for doing that. A Russian officer accused Wagner of abducting, torturing, and even raping Russian soldiers. At least one Russian soldier committed suicide after being raped by Wagner forces. Like, that's what's going on with the Russians, whether they're Wagner or Russian soldiers. That's the kind of weird infighting that they have there. RT says that Tucker was over the top. Now, when RT says that Tucker Carlson is over the top and emotional and shouldn't have been going so far in his presentation, you know Tucker's gone pretty far. Putin is not in control of Belgorod, and yeah, there's still, at this point, I believe there's still some Russian Legion forces there. The counteroffensive had some limited breakthrough, and here are the articles. Friday, what we know about the Novakova Dam. Well, so there's a couple things. So there were all these theories about it. So there was the theory that it was the Russians, that there was the Ukrainians, that it just happened. Like, I got a number of people that said, have you seen, now, I believe the Russians did it. They controlled it. It has to be blown from inside. You couldn't really blow it up from the outside with just missiles, or you'd have to have multiple missiles. There's no evidence of missiles coming down and hitting it. Now, Ryan, I can't remember what his last name is. Ryan, the military analyst, said, well, it could have been neglect and causing it to whatever. And that's an interesting theory. But there was seismic data captured by the Norwegians. I believe it was the Norwegians that indicates the dam was blown. There was an intercept where and this is yet to be verified, but the Ukrainian SBU put this out, intercept, two Russians talking about how, well, this went all wrong. We meant to scare, not destroy the dam. That could have been. That's a legitimate potential process, but they're still responsible even if that was the case. So Ukraine released that audio of that intercept, so it might have been more than planned. And there was also satellite images that perceived an explosion at the dam just before it happened. Like they saw something in the satellite that was more than just a collapse. So for all those reasons, it still points to Russia. Russia says ammonia pipeline blast could end the grain deal. I mean, the grain deal is pretty much over. You just destroyed the breadbasket, so there's not going to be the same need for it with the limited amount of wheat that they'll be exporting and corn and whatever else. Russia says, I'm sorry, Kyiv was quiet about the offensive, and so we don't know. Just relax. It'll be okay. We'll find out what's going on. The ISW talked about the counteroffensive underway. Putin's comments about the counteroffensive, which is rare because he usually doesn't make those kind of comments. Zelensky was criticizing the International Red Cross, and I stress International Red Cross. The Red Cross in Ukraine was active, but the International Red Cross was slow walking their relief efforts. And then Russia claimed to blow up a tank, and it was a tractor. I've got to show you this. This was in the New York Post. Here we go. Russia claims to blow up an advanced Ukrainian tank. This was in their military Russian Ministry of Defense. An advanced tank. Well, the tank was a tractor. And like, this is the kind of thing that you see with Russian propaganda. It's really kind of bad, and it's pervasive. Okay, and those are the links behind what I was talking about. Saturday, Putin claims that Russia is halting the counteroffensive. They're doing such a glorious job stopping the Ukrainian invaders. Limited attacks gains near Bakhmut. They're taking advantage of some of the disarray of Wagner switching out with the Russians. Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau had a surprise visit to Kyiv. Canada will be involved in training pilots, and they donated a seized Russian plane on Saturday. And then I'm doing this on Sunday morning, early on Sunday morning, and there is some evidence of a drone attack today in Kaluga. Kaluga is between Moscow and Ukraine. So it's, where is it? Kaluga. Kaluga's right here. And so there was 2 down drones, but we don't know if they came from Ukraine. We don't know much about it yet. So here's Moscow's up here, Ukraine's down in the bottom, and we just don't know. Okay, so that's a weekly wrap to help you understand all those things that are going there. Now, beyond watching hours and hours of YouTube to try to triangulate and watch both. Now, I watch both sides. I watch UA tubers and like Ukraine, pro-Ukraine YouTubers. I also watch as much as I can from RT and the pro-Kremlin voices in America, Scott Ritter and McGregor and things like that. So that's part of my method in trying to understand. And I'm showing you that because I want you to be able to have the tools that you need to be able to make sound judgments for yourself. Don't just believe me. If I say something, check to see if I'm right. I could be wrong. Okay, triangulate on that information. Thank you for the time. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. Thank you for the likes. Please share or subscribe. And thank you for the coffees. I really appreciate your support because this takes a lot of time. And again, thank you for taking the time not only to watch me, but thank you for caring. I'll be back tomorrow. Hope you will be too.